Last year we left off in laziness. Doesn't sound very good, but I was giving you a few conferences on laziness, just to review some of that. There are three ways in which to be lazy, that is, to do nothing. One is to pursue leisure excessively. You have to, of course, have some leisure, otherwise you go crazy. And there's nothing worse than a crazy priest. Right? Some priest that goes off the rails because he's working too hard, or he has a nervous breakdown, or you become useless, and actually you could become dangerous. So you have to have some leisure time and relax and things like that. But excessive pursuit of leisure is a part of laziness. All right? The second way to be lazy is to not do what you ought to do. So you could be very, very active in something you like fixing cars or working with computers or doing anything like that, but neglecting what you ought to be doing according to your state in life. So the housewife that loves to garden, and she's out in the garden looks beautiful, but the house is a wreck. See, the dishes are not done, and so forth and so forth. That's she's very active, but she's not doing what she ought to do. So she's not sitting around drinking cocktails or something like that. She's not doing what she ought to be doing. The third way is to do badly what you do. You're so lax about what you're doing, you have no spirit of perfection in it. You do the least and walk away from it. That's a form of laziness. Laziness is a very strong capital sin, and it is responsible for a lot of failure, particularly in the spiritual life. The spiritual laziness, we'll talk about spiritual laziness. It is the source of all sin. That doesn't mean that all sins proceed from laziness, but it is capable of producing any sin. That's what it means. Just as St. Paul says that avarice, money is the root of all evil, that doesn't mean that all sin comes from money. It means that the excessive love of money is capable of producing any kind of sin. Murder and cheating and stealing and lying and so forth. See, so laziness too can ruin anything. All right, so that's just a definition of laziness. So, St. John Chrysostom said, "There is no virtue whatever which laziness does not render very burdensome and painful and almost impossible to accomplish." Laziness wants to sit in a chair and watch a ball game. It doesn't want to do something that involves any kind of effort. And priests can be afflicted by laziness very easily. And it's something that you need to watch. A good remedy against laziness is a curriculum, in other words, a schedule for the day that you post up on your refrigerator or something. I do this at this time, this at this. I say office, I do this and this and this. And you know what you have to accomplish. Sometimes you might be on your own, or you might just be with one other priest, or you won't have this seminary rule to guide you every day and to accomplish for you what you need to accomplish. So you have to have a self-discipline, and you can't let laziness get into your spiritual life. If it does, it can ruin your spiritual life. You can fall easily into mortal sin by neglect of your office and various other ways. Failure to perform certain acts of charity, such as sick calls and... All right. He also says, St. John Chrysostom also says that laziness was the cause of Adam's fall. Not all theologians would agree with him. But he said if he had been busy, he would not have listened to the devil. So in that sense. But the Thomists have their own, they wouldn't say it was laziness. You see, Adam was only capable of sinning in certain ways. He had complete control over his passions. He was completely ruled by reason. So he couldn't commit a sin of impurity. He couldn't, any kind of sin of passion, he could not commit. So, and laziness would have been contrary to reason. You see. He was totally in control of himself. And the Thomists say that the sin of Adam was a sin of disobedience to God because of following the devil. Let's go back to the devil's sin. The devil's sin was a jealousy of God's glory. The devil was smart enough to know that he could not be God, but he wanted the glory of God. He was jealous over the glory of God and how all creation obeyed him and so forth. And he communicated that to Adam. So you'll have the knowledge. You'll know, you see. You'll have ultimately God's knowledge. Knowledge of good and evil. And you'll decide what's good and what's evil. It was putting man at the top of the universe and top of everything. You decide. You'll be the ruler. See, that was the sin of Adam. A totally intellectual sin in that sense. No passion, no nothing. And that's why it was so serious. See, the devil's sin was permanent because he cannot change his mind. He sees the effect of everything that he does. He saw all the effects of it. And so Adam too, it was no passion, don't forget he was of an enlightened intellect, etc. So but it's true that if he had been busy, he would not have committed this sin. And so laziness gives asylum to the devil. Idleness is the devil's workshop. That's the old saying. And so it is a source of all kinds of evil thoughts. The reason why young people commit sins with themselves and looking at dirty pictures and all, is because they're idle. They have nothing to do. They're sitting around the house. The parents are out. So they go to the internet and things happen. They're idle. They want the entertainment of doing impure things. And it's caused by laziness. If they were not idle, they would not do those things. St. Cyril said, "What is laziness except the loss of the time that passes and which does not return?" So once time goes, it doesn't come back. The pouring out of one's life, the falling backwards of him who advances in his journey. Laziness produces the softness of the flesh, generates pride, sets impurity on fire, unties the tongue, fosters poverty, and causes people to steal. So you see people living in squalor. Most of that, probably 90% or better, is due to laziness because they don't want to work. Especially in a country like this where getting a job, even a job whereby you could live decently, if not being a rich person, but just decent living, is fairly easy to get. So you could wash dishes at McDonald's. You're going to make a living. In California, they just passed a law that McDonald's has to pay $20 an hour to their employees. Let's all move to California. But so, if they're living in squalor and if they're stealing, it's because they are lazy and sinning. They're going into drugs, which of course puts a tremendous demand of money on them. Getting into drugs because they're lazy. They want the high. They want to sit around and just, be in another world, forget about their troubles. That's all due to laziness. When the missionaries went to California, Father Junipero Serra, the Indians did not know how to till the soil. The priests had to teach them how to till the soil. Because of laziness. They would just say, well, there's berries or something to eat, or there's this or that, or who knows what else they ate. But that's what happens when people are cut off even from civilization. They sink into very deep effects of original sin in all aspects. All of the capital sins come out in full bloom. And that's why they live that way. So he continues, water does not flow, which does not flow becomes stagnant. The sword which is not used becomes rusty. The foot that is not used becomes numb. And the relentless moth devours the clothing which one has set aside. That's St. Cyril. So, now, St. Bernard said, the lazy life is the mother of bagatelles and the stepmother of virtues. You probably don't know what a bagatelle is. A bagatelle, it's a French word actually, but it is an English word, means a trifle, something stupid and nothing. So it's the mother of bagatelles, doing stupid things that do not contribute to anyone's good, just idiotic, stupid things. That's and the stepmother of virtues. The stepmother, he means, in other words, that the stepmother doesn't like the virtues. Usually stepmothers have a, kind of a reputation. They're not all bad, but there's a reputation of stepmothers that they don't like the children that they receive from a previous marriage. Okay, so lazy people are curious. You see what's going on today. Who's running around with whom. They are constantly looking at the internet because they're lazy and being entertained by the internet. You have to watch that. There's that temptation looking at all the news things. There's so much information you can have now. So that could be lazy. It's not bad to look at news, but it makes you tend toward news that you don't really want or need. Like all of the filth of Hollywood people and their affairs and all of that. That is what laziness causes. That... But there are certain, if there's going to be a nuclear war, it'd be good to know about it. But not all of who's divorcing whom and who became a trans and so forth. Those things you don't need to really know. It makes people slanderous. So that means they tell bad stories about other people, even true stories. So this one is fooling around with that one, etc. And they lie because they want to make their conversations juicier. And since they do nothing, they busy themselves with examining, weighing, and judging the actions of others, condemning them, and in collecting facts so as to make fun of them and scoff at them. So they're busybodies. They have nothing to do except to worry about what you're doing. It's a source of a tremendous amount of sin, is laziness. So you have to, in your confessions and your examinations of conscience every day, you should look at laziness. Many times it's a dominant fault. So what did I put off today? The the axiom of the lazy. Why do today what you can put off until tomorrow? You say, what did I put off today? How much time did I spend in leisure? How much time did I spend on the internet? Did I put off my duties of any kind of spiritual duties or homework duties, etc.? Those are the things you have to ask yourself in your examination of conscience. So you always have to go for your predominant fault when you do your examination of conscience at night. What is my predominant fault? And how did I do it today? You see? And you're going to find some things that you did that correspond to the predominant fault. Almost certainly. Unless you're a saint. Even they commit sins too, believe it or not. No one is exempt from venial sin except the Blessed Virgin Mary. So even the great saints committed sins. St. Alphonsus was petrified of being, in the latter part of his life, of being condemned to hell. That tells you something. There's always some sin going on in you, and every single day you're doing some sin, pretty much. If you're not finding any, it means you need to do a better examination of conscience and need to do some spiritual reading to find out what you're missing. St. Bernard describes the effects of laziness. He says, once laziness takes hold of the soul, it becomes sluggish and its activity slows down. It pretends to no longer have any strength. Oh, I have to get up out of the chair, and take out the garbage. Oh, I'll do that tomorrow. See, it considers austerities to be tiresome, mortifications. It is invaded by a fear of poverty. It becomes narrow-minded. Grace is taken away from it. Time goes slowly. Reason is deadened. The intellect is extinguished. The original fervor diminishes. Lukewarmness increases together with its worries. Fraternal charity grows cold. Lust makes its blandishments known. There is a false security. Habit drags you along. That's St. Bernard's comment on laziness. Okay. Grace is taken away from it. Actual grace will not act on you if you posit voluntary obstacles. It's something like the wind in a sailing ship. If you fold up your sails, the wind will not take the ship. So if you posit deliberate obstacles to the work of actual graces are given to you the entire day. All right? But you can posit obstacles to them, and laziness is a big obstacle to actual grace. And by the way, getting back to the Mass, the source of all of the actual graces in the world is the sacrifice of the Mass. They are mediated by the Blessed Virgin Mary. That is the way in which God draws human beings to himself, by the actual graces that flow from the sacrifice of the Mass. So the sacrifice of the Mass is the constant, it is constantly pleasing to God as it goes on throughout the whole world. It's like the odor of incense constantly going up to God. And that's what Christ won on the cross. He didn't nullify the sins of all men by dying on the cross, but merited for them the actual graces to be drawn out of sin. We'll see that later too. So he continues, he says, what else shall I say? The law is disregarded. The right is abandoned. In other words, to do what is right is abandoned. Duty is proscribed. Right? It's forbidden. And the fear of the Lord is set aside. Finally, you yield to impudence And this man who is covered with shame and loaded with ignominy and confusion becomes presumptuous. So even though you are sinning in many ways by laziness, perhaps mortally, you become presumptuous that I'm not that bad, really, and I'm probably going to heaven. Then he falls from the heights of virtue into the abyss of vice, from a clean and well-paved road into a filthy mud, from a throne into a sewer. He was a great preacher. From heaven to earth, from the cloister into the world, from paradise to hell. That's, if you want to find that, that's in his sermon 63 on the Canticle of Canticles. I think we have his sermons here. I think so. Don't forget, he convinced all of his brothers to go into the monastery. I mean, he had the gift of talking. But that is a beautiful way to put it. The book of Proverbs says, because of the cold, the sluggard, who is a lazy man, would not plow, he shall beg therefore in the summer, and it shall not be given to him. Again, as Proverbs, the thoughts of the industrious always bring forth abundance, but every sluggard is always in want. And again, Proverbs, I passed by the field of the slothful man and by the vineyard of the foolish man, and behold, it was all filled with nettles and thorns, and thorns, had covered the face thereof, and the stone wall was broken down. So just...